The trial had been short. Oh, sorry, this is part two. The trial had been short, methodical, and clinical. Jury selection lasted just a few hours. Pearson used his peremptory strikes to exclude all but one of the handful of African Americans who had been summoned to serve on the jury. His lawyers objected, but the judge summarily dismissed their complaints. The state put Myers on the stand to tell his absurd story about Walter forcing him to drive to Jackson Cleaners because his arm hurt. This vision had Myers going into the cleaners where he saw Walter standing over the dead body of Rhonda Morrison. Bizarrely, he also claimed that a third person was present and involved in the murder, a mysterious white man with salt and pepper hair who was clearly in charge of the crime and who directed Walter to kill Myers too, but Walter couldn't because he was out of bullets. Walter thought the testimony was so nonsensical he couldn't believe that people were taking it seriously. Why wasn't anyone laughing? Chestnut's cross-examination of Myers made it clear that the witness was lying. When Chestnut finished, Walter was sure that the state would simply announce that they had made a mistake. Instead, the prosecutor brought Myers back up to repeat his accusations as if the logic and contradictions in the testimony were completely irrelevant, as if repeating his lies enough times in this quiet room would make them true. Bill Hooks testified that he'd seen Walter's truck pull out of the cleaners at the time of the murder and that he recognized the truck because it had been modified as a lowrider. Walter instantly whispered to his lawyers that he hadn't turned his truck into a lowrider until several months after Morrison was murdered. His lawyers didn't do much with that information, which frustrated Walter. Then another white man Walter had never heard of, Joe Hightower, took the stand and said he had seen the truck at the cleaners too. There were a dozen people who could talk about the fish fry and insist that Walter was at home when Rhonda Morrison was killed. His lawyers called only 3 of them. Everybody seemed to be rushing to get the trial over with, and Walter couldn't understand it. The state then called a white man, Ernest Welch, who said he was the furniture man who collected money at the McMillan house on the day they were having a fish fry. But he claimed it wasn't the same day that Rhonda Morrison was murdered. He said he remembered better than anyone when she was murdered because he was her uncle. He said that he had been so devastated that he went to the McMillan residence to collect money on a different day. The lawyer made their arguments. The jury retired, and less than 3 hours later, they filed back into the courtroom. Stone-faced, one by one, they pronounced Walter McMillan guilty. Part 2 questions are: who testified against Walter and what did they say? What did Ernest Welch, the furniture man, say on the stand, and was this true? What was the verdict, which is the decision made by the jury for Walter's case? Why do you think this was the verdict?